Hey everybody. I'm not having an intro or conclusory recording this week just because of logistical reasons, but hopefully that segment will return next week. Instead, we're just going to jump straight into the slides, and I'll try and keep it relatively brief this week because it's really building and reusing some of the things that we did last week. As a reminder and review, we're talking about effective exam writing format, and that is IRAC, Issue Rule Analysis Conclusion. Again, the caveat that CREAC is out there. Check with your professor. Most prefer IRACs. And to generate an IRAC exam answer, you use, of course, rule-based reasoning, like we talked about last week, which is applying the language of a rule to a set of facts to predict an outcome. It's very useful on exams. It's commonly used to really test your understanding of the law and how the law operates. So it's common on both issue spotting as well as IRAC type problem. And remember, as a reminder, that when you do write in an IRAC format, don't be conclusory or what some people will call telegraphic, like an old telegraph, where you just put the nouns in, stop, that kind of thing. Dog needs food, stop, that kind of telegraphic thinking and writing really puts the reader in a bad position. Because what it often does is it makes the reader fill in gaps that you've created by communicating in a conclusory way. And if the reader is an exam grader, like your professor, and you're making them fill in gaps in your conclusory writing rather than elaborating on points appropriately, that's when you start to lose points on an exam. Even if you have identified the right rule and apply it correctly, it's the explanation of its application that's so important in law school. And again, this tip that we talked about last week, using the acronym FULL, not only forces you to make sure that each element is there, as I emphasized last week, but it also forces you into a style of writing that is very explanatory and very palatable to your professors when they're reading your answers. It demonstrates knowledge and comprehension of the operation of the law. And that is what you want to show them you know. And that's how you get a good grade. And the importance of this full analysis is that if you undertake, even mentally, like I said, charts fine for when you learn, good for integrating that knowledge into your operational knowledge base, but as you get better at it, you can do it mentally. But if you go through the full analysis mentally, it'll project into your writing as well. So you always want to identify which facts from the hypo relate to the element. Some may not relate to the element. Some might be red flags. So you want to make sure you identify the right one. You convey your understanding of the fact, particularly highlighting aspects of the fact that are important for application of the rule. And then you link the language of the rule to your understanding and the fact. When you do that, things will line up appropriately and will enable you to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding very effectively and for you to obtain the score you want to obtain on an exam. Okay. This is the problem that you wrote about last week. Just going to leave it on the screen for a moment so you could refresh yourself of the facts. I'm sure you have it downloaded and can look at it there too. This is one of the lectures that it's unfortunate in an asynchronous format because we typically would talk through this stuff, as you can imagine. the assignment from last week was to analyze that question applying the mirror image rule. And I gave you the rules last week, but generally, and I haven't checked in with Professor Kaufman, but I know that she, in the past, and certainly commonly, makes distinction, as is appropriate, between what the common law governs and what the Uniform Commercial Code governs, the UCC governs. And common law governs transactions for services, while the UCC governs the sale of goods, generally speaking. So that's an important first rule, because you get to decide which corpus of rules to apply. Is it going to be the common law? Is it going to be the UCC? Well, first thing you have to analyze is what's the subject of the transaction, and that helps you decide that point. Acceptance of an offer is a manifestation of assent to the terms made by the offeree in a manner invited or required by the offer. And under the common law, an acceptance, just a different way of saying it really, an acceptance must be the mirror image of the offer, matching the terms of the offer. Now, if there are immaterial differences in the phrasing of the offer and acceptance, that doesn't defeat contract formation. But if there are material differences under the mirror image rule, it might very well, it could defeat contract formation. So, going back to this question, and this is where we would have a conversation in class, and it's kind of unfortunate. My dogs are bad at having conversation about law. They're pretty cute and obviously pretty loud, but they are bad at talking about the law, as are my children, who are 2.5 and 5. My wife is great at talking about the law, but she's practicing law as we speak, so I'm going to leave her do that. But, I would like to talk with you about it. We can't really at this point, of course, because of circumstances as they are. But if we go through, and I won't belabor these points because you have the materials in front of you, but if you go through each element here, go through each term rather, and look for the offer and the acceptance. So there was a duty to provide media appearances as appropriate during the specified days, or on the specified days. The acceptance added one media appearance. So it's an altered offer, for sure, but is it material? The court, this does come from a court decision, and the court in this case went one way, but with different lawyering, of course, you could go a different way too, because whether one additional media appearance is material depends on a lot of facts, that some of which are in the question, some of which aren't. But you can interpret that for yourself and provide your understanding. Depending on your understanding, it will compel a certain result. If you argue in your answer that it is material change to the contract, of course, then you would say that is defeats contract formation because there wasn't, based on the mirror image rule, an acceptance. Of course, in contrast, if you say this is an immaterial change to the contract, then the mirror image rule compels, at least for this term, a result of a contract being formed rather than formation being defeated. As you go through each of the terms of the contract, you can conduct the same analysis from each perspective. And you don't have to say, all are material or all are immaterial. You present your arguments as you find most compelling and justify your positions. That's really a big part of what law school exams are about, is justifying your position, providing the legal reasoning for why you feel that your answer is correct and the best answer. And then after you look at each of the individual terms, you consider all of the changes together. This is another judgment call. but this is where lawyers thrive. We this is where we function. In the gray areas where everything is a judgment call, that's where lawyers contribute the greatest value to their clients, frankly. And so you make the arguments as is appropriate for your understanding, and that compels certain results. And that depends on you. It's a choose your own adventure. So here we go. Here's the sample answer. I will not read it. And there was much rejoicing. But you can see by the color, there's color coding, which ties into the elements of a full analysis in Iraq as well. So you see that I'll point out a couple of important things after giving you a minute to read it. Okay. First, I want to point out again that the analysis starts with here. That's why it's underlined, so I remembered to talk about it. But again, this is a very good way of starting your analysis to telegraph in a good way to your to the reader, namely your professor, that your analysis is starting here. So you lay out the important facts, or I'm sorry, you lay out the rule, you present your understanding and analysis. It's an alteration, and so this makes one argument. You could have made it the other direction as well, but the conclusion based on the understanding presented here is that it wouldn't be material. And similarly for the later points, you see the color coding as such that it highlights to you, the reader, here what each part is doing, but also you see the use of additionally and finally and the repeated use of thus. It just telegraphs where you are in your analysis to the reader, and it really is a great thing to keep going. To do, rather. One more thing I'd like to point out, and this may drive those of you who were English majors or creative writing or journalism majors a bit crazy, but you see the parallel structure that's employed in this answer. The fact and term of the contract and the facts relating to it take the form that they take based on what you have to explain. But after that, the immediate next sentence in each of these instances says this is an alteration. In the first term and the third term, this is an alteration. Again, this is an alteration. So I point that out because I think I said last week, look, this ain't Shakespeare. And I like these ain't because, really emphasizes the point, whatever. But you get the idea when you see this parallel structure. It isn't creative writing. The goal of this isn't to necessarily, not here at least, to impress with the delicate structure of your arguments necessarily. Here it's to demonstrate that you understand the operation of the area of law, here contracts, that you're writing about. And to do that most effectively, the use of signaling words in this very formulaic way is useful. The use of parallel structure, like this is an alteration, and starting a conclusion, thus this change is, lets the reader follow along much more easily because they're looking for the same kind of information in the same place, and they know what will be coming afterwards and before. So that's why when I say that it's not Shakespeare, it's really, it's not great reading. But what does this answer communicate? A clear understanding of how the mirror image would apply to this contract in each of these contract terms. And it has a full analysis. The colors are as The colors in the letters follow the colors in the answer. Like I said before, however, there are alternative understandings of the facts and alternative interpretations of the facts. So we can certainly say factually that in each instance here that the offer was altered. But whether it's material or immaterial is a debatable point for which cogent arguments, what we would say in law, colorable arguments, can be offered. And how do you present that information in your answer? You can imagine there's lots of different ways you can present it. And incidentally, with regards to this final columns on this slide, there's lots of different ways this could be resolved, whether it's material or immaterial. Your resolution of that issue is commonly not going to be the dominating factor in whether or not you have a good answer. Instead, it's going to be how you demonstrate your understanding of the law and present your analysis. So, again, what we'll be talking about right now, however, is how you present these two competing understandings to show the professor that, hey, not only did I recognize these potential things to talk about, these issues, I also can see that there are competing understandings that would lead to different outcomes. I've considered them, and here's what I think. How do you do that the best way so that the professor will appreciate what you're trying to communicate and pick up on it very effectively? There are, of course, different ways. And if you're a very good writer, you may want to interleave these things throughout the paragraph to reach a conclusion at the end, right? And I would urge you not to do that. Like I said about the answer that we discussed earlier, the key is presenting things to a sufficient level of detail and in a very organized way so that the reader will pick up on what you're trying to convey. And rather than interleaving, making points along the way and then holding a suspenseful moment out before you reach the conclusion, what I instead suggest is presenting almost two parallel Iraqs for each interpretation and introducing it consistently with on the other hand. I mean, it will feel awkward, but the reader, like I said, your professor is going to have, 170, a bunch. Yeah, a whole bunch of exams. That's the technical term, whole bunch of exams to read. You want to make it easy to grade. You want to make it so they can pick it up and give you points like they're shaking salt and pepper on the page, right? So how do you do that? You present it in an easily consumable way. I mean, this is in a sense a marketing effort. I mean, it has to be supported by your understanding of the law. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, it is such that you're able to more effectively present this information in certain ways, and you should employ that because it will get you more sales, which in this context is more points on your answer. So I'm going to talk just a moment about the answer we have up here, just the structure, so that you can apply it for next week's task. So the first part is the same analysis that was presented earlier, where the fact, understanding, and Iraq and the full analysis is there, and it reaches the conclusion. Thus, the change should be viewed as immaterial. On the other hand, present an analysis parallel to this one. You don't have to restate what the alteration was, of course. That's just 3 sentences earlier. But you again say the alteration here, on the other hand, the alteration here may, depending on the circumstances, be considered material. Media appearances are very extensive, stressful events rather, and accordingly, adding a media appearance onto the terms of the contract would represent a material change for anyone who's undergone the difficulties of a media appearance or something like that. In this context, the change should be viewed as immaterial. And then, after you present both arguments, therefore, you say which you prefer. The changes materially altered or did not materially alter the terms of FBC's offer, and consequently, she did or did not accept the offer. So as you deal with each element of the each term of the contract, after you present the parallel IRAC, you reach a conclusion with regards to that, considering both positions. So considering both positions, the more compelling argument is that the change was, let's say, material, because it's far more significant to undergo a media appearance for a starlet, and accordingly it's material. Then you go on to the next term of the contract, and at the end, again, you offer the grand therefore and say whether or not a contract was formed, hearkening back to the call of the question. Incidentally, I would have moved the slide back, but I would have lost everything, all the recording I did on that slide. So I apologize for talking about the last slide on this slide. But that's the reason for it. I just wanted to give you the justification. I think my hope is that you understand, however, the overall structure that I've been discussing and how to apply it. And the good thing is, since we are a skills class, you get to practice this. And you'll practice it as you go forward, too. But the task for next week is fairly straightforward. Add understanding, too, which is really the contrary position to what you took last week. And support those positions as you see fit. And then you add resolution. Resolution, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier. I apologize if I didn't. Resolution is simply determining which of those two competing positions is the more compelling one. So you resolve that tension by picking one of the two. And frankly, by the point that you reach where you pick one of the two, if you've presented a good analysis already, you're going to be getting you're already racking up points as you do that. So the determination of whether or not it's material will be not beside the point, but you've already made hay with the issue. And so when you say which way that you think the issue should resolve, you're going to be good either way for the most part, unless it's a position that's completely contrary to law. If it's dependent upon an interpretation of the facts, however, your resolution will commonly be supportable in either direction. But stepping back to next week, so add those portions of the answer to what you've already written for the IRAC. Same question, not a new question this week. Just expand your answer based on your understanding, or your understanding too. You're the contrary position. Include that parallel argument, counter argument, incorporate a resolution for each of those times where there is an issue between the two. And additionally, if you have to, edit your answers based on the feedback from your mentors. Depends on what they had to say. You may want to spend some time incorporating that, rewriting the answer, or depending on the feedback, maybe it isn't appropriate to do that. I'll leave that in you and your mentor's hands. But to sum up, given there isn't a summary lecture today, I wanted to just emphasize that what we're doing here is presenting you with structures and formats that you can use to effectively communicate to your professor that you understand the operation of the law. And by using signaling words, by using parallel structures and parallel phrasings, you really put yourself in a good position to generate an exam answer that's very palatable and easy to score and will accordingly get you a better score in that exam answer than if you don't follow these structures. Again, if you have any questions, my email is, it's obviously billmorej@duke.edu. And feel free to pass them along. Again, I'm on campus Thursday afternoons, so if you want to stop by my office in the library, the DCLI, I will be there. Good luck. Have a great week. Bye.